What if I told you the thing you've been taught to feel ashamed of, the thing you've been told to hide, is actually your greatest source of power? And what if I told you that over a century ago, someone tried to tell the world that truth about women's desire, and they buried him for it? I was 10 years old the first time I felt it. That strange, electric ache in my chest that I didn't know how to name. It wasn't the kind of wanting people warned me about, like wanting too much candy or wanting to stay up past bedtime. No, this was different. It was deeper. I wanted to be seen, to be held, to be chosen, not just for what I did or how I behaved, but for who I was. And even at 10, I somehow knew that this wanting was dangerous, that it would make people uncomfortable if I let it show. So I did what so many of us do. I learned to stay quiet. I watched how other girls behaved. The good ones, the ones teachers smiled at and mothers bragged about, and I mimicked them. I kept my hands folded. I lowered my eyes when boys looked at me. I laughed at the right jokes, even when they stung. And every time that deep wanting rose up inside me, wanting to speak, wanting to reach out, wanting to want something so badly, I pushed it down. Because the unspoken rule was clear. Good girls don't want too much, and certainly not that much. Looking back, I can see how early that silence took root. How I was praised for being mature for my age when what I really was scared. Scared of taking up too much space, scared of needing too much, scared that my wanting would make me unlovable. And isn't that what so many of us are taught, whether anyone says the words out loud or not? That the price of being loved is to be small, to be quiet, to want less. And here's where Freud comes in. Freud dared to name what no one wanted to see. That girls and women do want not just security, not just safety, but passion, connection, fulfillment. That our desire is not some passive thing waiting to be awakened by someone else, but something alive inside us from the very beginning. And that terrified people. Because if women were allowed to want, allowed to own that wanting, the whole system built to control them would start to crack. But instead of listening, the world turned on him. They said he was wrong. They silenced him. And in doing so, they taught generations of girls like me to silence ourselves, to believe that the wanting inside us was shameful, dangerous, wrong. But here's the truth I wish someone had told that 10-year-old girl. Your desire isn't what makes you dangerous. Your silence is. Because silence is what breaks us from the inside out. And wanting, truly wanting, is what makes us human. I still remember sitting in that small, quiet room across from my therapist, my hands clenched so tight they ached. I was in my 20s, and everything in my life looked fine from the outside. I had the job, the friends, the apartment that felt like my own. But inside, I was empty. I was so lost, I couldn't even begin to name what I needed. And I remember the exact moment when my voice cracked. And I whispered the words I'd been terrified to admit even to myself. I don't even know what I want. That confession felt like a failure, like proof that I was somehow defective, broken in a way I couldn't fix. And the shame, oh, the shame was thick, heavy, suffocating, because when you're a woman and you don't know what you want, or you're afraid to ask for it, or you've spent so long burying it that you can't even find it anymore, it feels like you've failed at something fundamental. But here's what I've come to understand. That shame wasn't born with me. It didn't start the day I sat in that office, or the day I first swallowed down my voice as a child. That shame was handed to me, inherited, generation after generation passed down like a secret we weren't supposed to question. When Freud spoke about female desire, he did something radical. He suggested that women's wanting was real, that it was complex, layered, and not something that could be easily mapped onto the male experience. He said, women don't desire like men, and that's not a flaw. But instead of embracing that truth, society recoiled. The medical community, the moral authorities of his time, they couldn't accept a version of women that didn't fit into neat little boxes of purity, duty, and obedience. So what did they do? They called us hysterical, neurotic, unstable. They said our desires were signs of sickness, not signs of life. And that story, that lie, became part of our inheritance. Think about it, how many of us grew up watching mothers, grandmothers, aunts, older sisters who never spoke their deepest wants out loud, who smiled through disappointment, who served and sacrificed, who taught us with every unspoken word that wanting too much was dangerous, that we could be anything as long as we didn't need too much, as long as we didn't ask too much. And so we learned to make ourselves small, to turn our hunger into guilt, to trade our longing for approval, to believe that our value lies in how well we can suppress what makes us whole. But here's the hard, beautiful truth I want you to hear. Shame doesn't mean you're broken. It means you inherited a story that was never yours to carry. And you get to put it down. You get to stop passing it on. You get to remember that your wanting, your deep, real, messy wanting, is not a weakness. It's your birthright. There's a particular kind of heartbreak that comes not from being invisible, but from being seen, truly seen, and then erased. If you've ever risked showing someone your real self, your rawest need, your deepest truth, only to have them turn away, dismiss you, or act like what you shared didn't matter, you know this pain. It's the kind of betrayal that leaves you questioning whether you should have spoken at all. I remember the first time I gathered every ounce of courage I had and let myself be vulnerable with someone I loved. I told him what I wanted, what I really wanted. I said, I need to feel like I matter. I need to feel chosen. I need to know that my heart is safe with you. And for a moment he looked at me, and I saw something soften in his eyes. I felt just for a second like he understood, like my truth had landed. And then he laughed, a small, uncomfortable laugh, and said, "You're being too sensitive. Don't overthink things." That moment changed something in me. It wasn't just the dismissal that hurt. It was that I dared to show my underbelly, the part of me that I'd protected for so long. And instead of being met with care, I was met with erasure. And I learned in that instant that being vulnerable wasn't always safe. That sometimes, instead of being embraced, you're made to feel foolish for even trying. This is the same betrayal Freud faced. He spent years listening to women, really listening. He heard their stories, their longing, their confusion, their pain, and he saw what so many refused to see. That female desire wasn't some faint echo of men, that it was vast, mysterious, and powerful in its own right. He tried to give language to what had long been silenced, and instead of being honored for it, he was ridiculed. His work on female sexuality was dismissed, minimized, distorted. The truth he tried to bring into the light was pushed back into the shadows. And what does that teach us? That telling the truth about our desire is risky, that the world might not be ready for it, that people might look us in the eye, see the most tender parts of us, and still choose to look away. But here's what I want you to hear. The betrayal isn't yours to carry. When someone sees you and erases you, that says nothing about your worth, your truth, or your right to want. That's about their fear, their discomfort, their inability to hold what is real. The deepest betrayal is not when others fail to see us. It's when we let their failure convince us to stop showing up as ourselves. Don't let that happen. Your desire is still true. Your voice is still needed. And your courage to speak it, that's how we heal what generations before us could not. Silence is a strange thing. At first, it feels like protection. We tell ourselves that if we don't say what we want, if we don't admit what we long for, then we can't be rejected. If we stay quiet, we won't make anyone uncomfortable. We won't rock the boat. We won't risk being called needy, dramatic, selfish, too much. I lived that silence for years. I convinced myself that it was strength, that I was mature for not asking, that I was noble for putting other people's needs first. But let me tell you the truth that hit me like a freight train one day. Silence doesn't protect us. It doesn't keep us safe. It doesn't earn us love. Silence starves us, slowly, quietly, from the inside out. I think about the times I sat at dinner tables, smiling, nodding, laughing at jokes that hurt me. I think about the nights I lay next to someone and felt lonelier than if I'd been alone. I think about all the times I swallowed the words I most needed to say. I need you. I'm not okay. I want more. And I remember the ache that grew in the pit of my stomach every time I betrayed my own voice. That ache wasn't from wanting too much. It was from asking for nothing at all. And this is what Freud tried to make the world see. He tried to tell the truth about what happens to women when we are asked, generation after generation, to silence our desire. He saw the cost of that silence, the depression, the anxiety, the numbness, the hysteria, and required time and silence. All of these things they diagnosed women with wasn't a flaw of the feminine mind. It was the natural outcome of being told over and over that our wanting was wrong, dangerous, shameful. And still, even after he spoke that truth, the world didn't want to hear it. They buried his insights about female desire because they were too disruptive. They required too much of us, too much honesty, too much reckoning, too much change. And so the silence continued. But here's what I know now. Silence isn't neutral. It doesn't just sit quietly in the background. It grows, it spreads, it hollows us out until we don't recognize ourselves. And the longer we stay silent, the harder it becomes to remember what we ever wanted in the first place. What breaks us isn't desire. What breaks us is starving ourselves of it. What breaks us is pretending we don't need what we need. What breaks us is believing that our hunger is something to be ashamed of. But the beautiful, painful thing about hunger is that it doesn't go away. It waits for us. It waits for us to stop being afraid. It waits for us to find the courage to speak again. And when we finally do, when we let our desire rise up and take its place in the world, that's when we begin to heal. There comes a point, often after we've spent years trying to stay small, trying to silence the parts of us that ache for more, when something inside us refuses to be quiet any longer. It might not look dramatic. It might not come with fireworks or some grand declaration. Sometimes it's just a whisper, a quiet, steady voice that says, "You can't keep living like this. You were made for more." For me, it wasn't one big, bold moment. It was 1,000 small ones. The day I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back at me because she looked so tired, so empty. The night I sat alone in my apartment and realized I felt lonelier in my silence than I ever would if I risked telling the truth. The morning I woke up and thought, what if I stop trying so hard to be what everyone else needs and start trying to be what I need? That's where courage is born, not in the absence of fear, but in the decision to want anyway. To want despite knowing it might scare people. To want despite the risk of rejection. To want despite the centuries of shame we've inherited. Freud's great insight, the one that got him silenced, was that female desire is not small, it's not secondary, it's not a reflection of someone else's wanting, it's its own force, its own fire. And for too long, we've been told to dim it. But the truth is, the world doesn't change because we keep wanting less. The world changes when we own our wanting and stop apologizing for it. I think of the women who came before me, the ones who wanted anyway, the women who dared to ask for more than survival, who asked for passion, for partnership, for purpose. Women who were labeled difficult, dangerous, selfish, and who kept wanting anyway, because they knew that wanting is where our aliveness lives. Here's what I want you to know. Every time you choose to listen to that quiet voice inside you, the one that says, I want more, you are doing something radical. The courage to want anyway doesn't mean we stop being afraid. It means we stop letting fear choose for us. It means we stop waiting for permission. It means we stop mistaking being small for being safe. And it means we begin, at last, to come home to ourselves. Because here's the truth that no one can take from you. Your desire is not dangerous. Your desire is your power. And the world doesn't need more women who've learned to want less. The world needs more women who have the courage to want fully, fiercely, without apology, and to want anyway. So here's my invitation to you. Stop waiting to be told it's okay. It is okay. Want fiercely, want deeply, and never let the world's fear of your power convince you that you should be small. Freud tried to tell us, it's time we listened. We, 7